Welcome back to the podcast. Today I'm going to speak about the refugee crisis around the world and how many refugees there are around the world and how much of an impact is having on the world and what we can do to make it easier for the refugees and for the countries that they're living in and what we can do to prevent more refugees in the future. Many powerful politicians and influential media might give the impression that rich countries, particularly in the West, are doing more than enough to help people fleeing war and persecution, but in reality, the picture looks very different. The international community, and in particular wealthy nations, are failing to meaningfully share and the responsibility for protecting people who have fled their homes in search of safety. In other words, they are failing to agree and support a fair and predictable system for protecting people forced to leave everything behind because of violence and persecution. Instead, lower and middle income countries are doing much more than their fair share, hosting more than double the number of refugees than high income countries. In 2019, more than two-thirds of all refugees come from just five countries: Syria, Venezuela, Afghanistan, South Sudan, and Myanmar. Syria has been the main country of origin for refugees since 2014, and at the end of 2019, there were 6.6 million Syrian refugees hosted by 126 countries worldwide. In 2019, only 0.5% of the world's refugees were resettled. Over the past decade, just over 1 million refugees were resettled compared to 3.9 million who returned to their country. Wealthier countries aren't doing nearly enough to share the cost of protecting people who have left everything behind. Appeals for humanitarian assistance for refugees are constantly and often severely underfunded. In short, the world urgently needs a new global plan based on genuine international cooperation and a meaningful and fair sharing of responsibilities. Some of the countries with the most refugees that have the most refugees are Germany with over 1.1 million, Lebanon with over 1.4 million, Sudan with over 1 million, Colombia with over 1.7 million, Turkey with more than 3.6 million, Jordan with over 2.9 million, Uganda with over 1.4 million, and Pakistan with over 1.2 million. Now these numbers show how much refugees that are in the world, and you can see from what I've just said that the countries that they are in, a lot of them are developing, maybe third world countries, when at the forefront of it, the wealthier countries were saying they're going to do their bit, whereas what we see now is they haven't really done much. They've taken in a few refugees and made it look like that they've been helping the most. Violence, insecurity, persecution, and shortage of food, medicine, and other basics have prompted around 3.7 million Venezuelans to leave their country. Many wealthier states continue to prioritize policies that will deter people from seeking asylum and finding ways to stop people coming altogether. At the same time, they are putting the onus on the nearby countries to protect people fleeing for their lives. Such restrictive and short-sighted policies are forcing women, men and children to take dangerous land and sea journeys, putting their lives at risk and fueling human rights abuses. Now, this shows that not only are those rich countries pretending that they're taking in so many refugees when they're not, when they're putting the burden, not burden, but making the nearby countries of the refugees to take in the refugees, or they're t- uh, taking in a few and making it look like they're taking in a lot. Not only are they doing that, they're putting in restrictions so people don't come in or can't come in or don't want to come in. So that's like you're literally not taking in anyone anyway, and you're putting them off from coming into your country, and then you're saying that you're helping the most and you're at the forefront and you're welcoming, and when you're out doing absolutely nothing. And to make it worse, these big countries like the US, um, UK, China, um, parts of the Middle East, Russia, other Europe, we these countries they're the ones that often they're the ones that start or have some sort of role to play in these refugees being created, either through either through politics or other ways. They're starting wars or conflicts, or they um, create the environment to birth uh, terrorism. So then the country gets destabilized, and then people have to flee their countries. So they create these things, and then they're surprised when the consequences is refugees are created from that, and then they're even more surprised when they have to deal with the consequences of housing the refugees in their countries. So they do all the all the they do when it suits them. They do what they like. So they go to those countries, do what they want, and then leave those countries a mess. And then they're okay with it. They sit down like nothing's happened, or they make other countries fix their mess. Then when it's the refugees, or when the outcome is there's millions of refugees from what they've done, they hide behind and make the other countries, the smaller countries, house the refugees, and they pretend that they're at the forefront of housing them when they're not, and they um, put in restrictions and other things to deter the refugees from coming. So next time you think about going to a country or starting a war or doing this or doing that, think about what's going to happen, what the consequences are going to be. Are more refugees going to be created from this? And if they are you ready to accept the consequences and house the refugees? So I think the whole world needs to rethink their strategy of how they can house refugees, and make sure they're all housed all over the world. So it's not just on one country to take all of them in, and the world needs to um, think about what they're gonna do in the future, because what they've done in the past hundreds of years is just been caused destruction, which has created refugees. Going forward, we need to do things so the outcome isn't more refugees, and the refugees that we do have now, we need to house them properly and um, give them all the support they need, especially as we're the ones that made them feel the need to flee their countries after what we did to their country.